7 years ago, I was just Mia, a 24-year-old with a restless heart and a thirst for adventure. I worked as a tour guide, leading groups through breathtaking landscapes, my eyes always on the horizon, dreaming of exploring every corner of the world. I wasn't looking for love, but love found me, or so I thought. Nathan entered my life like a storm, intense, mesmerizing, and impossible to ignore. He was older, successful, a lawyer with a sharp mind and an even sharper suit. The way he carried himself, the way he spoke, made me feel like I was the only person in the world who mattered. He showered me with compliments, made grand promises of a life filled with passion and excitement, and I fell hard. We were married within a year. Everyone said it was fast, but when you're caught in a whirlwind, time doesn't seem to matter. I thought I had found my happily ever after. Then came the first crack. One evening, over a candlelit dinner, Nathan told me he had received an incredible job offer from a prestigious law firm in a big city a few hours away. "This is it, Mia. My chance to reach my full potential," he said, his eyes alight with ambition. I wanted to be happy for him. I truly did. But the thought of leaving my job, my friends, my entire life behind sent a wave of unease through me. Still, I loved him. And love, I told myself, meant sacrifice. We moved into a beautiful, spacious house in an upscale neighborhood. At first, it was exciting, exploring the city, trying new restaurants, attending elegant social events. But then, slowly, something shifted. Nathan became different, less patient, more demanding. The charming man I had married began to show another side, one that was colder, harsher, unrecognizable. "Mia, can you work any slower?" he snapped one day as I unpacked boxes in our still chaotic living room. "I can't stand living in this mess." The words stung. This wasn't the man I married, but I told myself he was just stressed, adjusting to the pressures of his new job. I ignored the gnawing feeling in my gut. Then it got worse. Finding a new job in an unfamiliar city proved harder than I anticipated. When I brought up the idea of going back to tour guiding, Nathan scoffed. "Mia, you need to focus on managing our home. A lawyer's wife can't be gallivanting around with tourists," he said dismissively. Something about the way he said it, the condescension in his voice, the way he made my dreams sound ridiculous, left a bitter taste in my mouth. The perfect partnership I had envisioned started to feel more like a carefully crafted prison. And I had no idea that this was only the beginning. At first I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe Nathan was just adjusting to his new job. Maybe he was under a lot of stress. But the changes in him weren't temporary. They were permanent. The little criticisms turned into constant complaints. "Why is dinner late? You spend too much time doing nothing. A wife should know how to take care of her husband properly." I started walking on eggshells around him, afraid to say or do the wrong thing. Every conversation felt like a potential landmine, waiting to explode at the slightest misstep. Then, one evening, it did. I had spent all afternoon preparing dinner, his favorite, a slow-cooked roast with rosemary and garlic. When Nathan got home, he barely acknowledged me. He sat at the table, scrolled through his phone, and only looked up when I placed the plate in front of him. He took one bite. Then his expression twisted with disgust. "What is this?" he muttered, shoving the plate away. "This tastes like garbage. Start over." I stood there, frozen, my stomach sinking. I had spent hours making that meal. I had followed the recipe perfectly. "Nathan, Did I stutter, Mia?" He cut me off, his voice sharp. "Throw it out and make something else. Now." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I swallowed them down. Without another word, I picked up the plate and walked to the trash, dumping everything in. That night, I ate alone in the kitchen after he had stormed upstairs, leaving me with the mess. And that was the moment I realized I wasn't his wife anymore. I was his servant. Things only spiraled from there. Nathan stopped pretending to be the man I fell in love with. He criticized everything: the way I cleaned, the way I dressed, the way I breathed. I suggested hiring a housekeeper, hoping to lighten my load. He laughed in my face. "What a joke. You don't even have a real job, Mia. And you want someone else to do the only thing you contribute to this house? Unbelievable." I stopped arguing. It wasn't worth it. The nights were the worst. He would stay up late drinking, scrolling through his phone, muttering about how hard his life was. Then, in the middle of the night, he'd wake me up, sometimes by yanking the blanket off me, sometimes by shaking me awake. "Get up," he'd say, "the house is a mess, clean it." So I did. At 2 a.m., on my hands and knees, scrubbing the kitchen floor, while Nathan stood behind me, watching. You missed a spot. My hands ached, my knees throbbed, but I kept scrubbing, because I knew what would happen if I didn't. I had become a prisoner in my own home. But the night everything truly changed, the night that finally cracked me open, was the night of the party. Nathan had won a high-profile case, and he wanted to celebrate. "You'll handle the entire event," he told me. "I want everything perfect." For days I slaved away, planning the menu, decorating the house, making sure everything was flawless. I didn't sleep the night before, running through every detail over and over, terrified that something would go wrong. The night of the party, Nathan came home early. He handed me a glass of wine. "Here, you look like you could use this." I took it, grateful for a moment of kindness. The wine tasted strange, bitter, but I told myself I was imagining things. "Go change," Nathan said, already pouring himself another drink. "The guests will be here soon." I climbed the stairs, exhaustion washing over me. By the time I reached our bedroom, the room was spinning. Darkness swallowed me whole. I woke up the next morning with a pounding headache, my mouth dry, my thoughts foggy. Downstairs I heard voices, one of them sharp and angry. Nathan's mother. I forced myself to get up, my legs shaky as I made my way down the stairs. Nathan's mother, Margaret, turned to me the second I appeared. Well, look who finally decided to show up." Her voice was dripping with venom. "You should be ashamed of yourself." I blinked, trying to piece together what was happening. "What? You humiliated my son last night," Margaret snapped. "You got drunk and made a fool of yourself in front of all his colleagues. He had to call me to entertain his guests while you were passed out like a disgrace." No, that wasn't right. I only had one glass of wine," I stammered. Margaret let out a cold laugh. "Don't bother with excuses. Everyone saw what a mess you are. My son deserves better than a wife who can't handle herself in public." I felt sick. The pieces of last night started falling into place. The bitter taste of the wine, Nathan barely touching his own glass. The dizziness, the blackout. He drugged me, and now he was making me look unstable. No one would believe me. If I left him now, I would be the drunken, irresponsible wife who abandoned her perfect, successful husband. Nathan had set the perfect trap, but he had underestimated me. That was the day I knew. I couldn't leave yet. I had to plan. I had to gather proof. I had to outsmart him. And I would. From that day forward, something inside me changed. Fear was still there, gripping me like a vice, but beneath it, something new burned. A quiet, simmering defiance. Nathan thought he had me trapped. Thought he could rewrite reality to fit his narrative. But he didn't know that I wasn't the same naive girl who had once believed in his promises. I was going to get out, but I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I needed evidence. So I started documenting everything. Nathan's cruelty had become so routine that he didn't even try to hide it anymore. Every insult, every threat, every moment of his calculated gaslighting. I started recording our conversations in secret. Whenever he started berating me, I'd slip my phone into my pocket, hitting record before he could notice. "You're pathetic, Mia. You'd be nothing without me. You think anyone else would want you. Look at you. You can't even keep a house clean. Try leaving and I'll ruin you. I'll make sure you have nothing." I saved every audio file, every abusive text message. I wrote down dates, times, exact words. I kept my journal hidden in the back of my closet under an old shoebox full of receipts, every page filled with the truth, a truth I would use against him when the time came. The recordings weren't the only thing I collected. Nathan had a habit of talking too much when he drank. Late at night, when he sat in the living room with a glass of scotch, he'd start bragging, to himself, to the empty room, sometimes even to me. One night, I heard him mumbling to himself while scrolling through his phone. I quietly crept to the hallway, my heart pounding. my phone already recording in my pocket. Dumb little idiot, he muttered, laughing under his breath. She actually believed I'd let her embarrass me. Not a chance. He clinked his ice against his glass. Just one pill, just enough to make her look bad. Easy. My blood turned to ice. There it was. Proof. He had admitted to drugging me. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking, my mind racing. This was the moment I knew. I had him. I just needed to be smart. I spent the next few weeks perfecting my plan. Nathan was careless in his arrogance, assuming I was too weak to fight back. That was his biggest mistake. I bought a burner phone and hid it in the lining of my suitcase, somewhere he'd never think to look. I backed up all my recordings and photos, storing them in a cloud account under a fake name. At the same time, I kept up the perfect act. I played the doting wife, smiled at the right moments, agreed with whatever he said. I didn't push back. I didn't give him a reason to suspect that I was plotting against him. And then, the final piece fell into place. Nathan had another big case win, which meant another party. Another chance for him to parade me around as his obedient trophy wife. "You'll handle everything, Mia. No screw-ups this time," he warned, pointing a finger in my face. I forced a smile. "Of course, Nathan. I won't let you down. But I had no intention of playing along this time. Because this was my way out. Nathan's victory party was in 3 days. I knew this was my only chance. If I waited too long, he might catch on. And if he caught on, I didn't want to think about what he'd do. I had the recordings, the evidence. But evidence meant nothing if I couldn't get away safely. Nathan had connections. Cops, lawyers, powerful people who would believe his version of events over mine. If I ran and he found me, he'd drag me back. And this time, he'd make sure I never had a way out again. I needed to disappear, completely. I contacted Sarah, my childhood best friend, the only person I could trust. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year, not since Nathan had slowly isolated me from everyone in my life. I sent her a text from my burner phone. "Mia, Sarah, I need your help. I can't talk much, but I need a place to stay. I'm leaving Nathan." Her response came almost instantly. "Sarah, oh my God. Say the word and I'll be there. When? Where? What do you need?" My hands shook as I typed. "Mia, 3 days. I need a car, I need cash, and I need someone to have my back. Sarah." "Done. You don't have to do this alone, Mia. Just tell me what you need." I swallowed back tears. For the first time in years, I wasn't alone. Nathan had control of everything. Our bank accounts, my credit cards, even my phone bill. If I tried to withdraw a large sum, he'd notice immediately. So I got creative. For the next 3 days, every time I went to the grocery store, I took out cash back. Just $20 here, $40 there. Small enough amounts that wouldn't raise suspicion. By the end of it, I had almost $500 stashed inside an empty tampon box under the sink. Not much, but enough to get far away. I kept up the act. I smiled when Nathan came home. I nodded when he barked orders. I laughed when he made cruel jokes at my expense. I needed him to believe I was still under his control. The night before the party, he sat on the couch with his scotch, watching me as I cleaned. "You're finally learning, Mia," he said with a smirk. "See what happens when you just listen?" I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. Soon, just one more night. The night of the party. The night of my escape. Everything was perfect. The house was spotless. The food was prepared. The music was set. The guests started arriving, all of them laughing and sipping their expensive drinks, oblivious to the war raging inside me. Nathan was in his element, basking in the attention, shaking hands, flashing his charming, fake-ass smile. And I was waiting for the moment. And then it came. Nathan had been drinking all night, his ego swelling with each compliment thrown his way. Finally, around midnight, he grabbed my arm, his grip bruising, and whispered in my ear, "Go upstairs and change into something sexy. I want my wife to look the part." I nodded obediently. And then I walked up those stairs for the last time. My escape was already in motion. While Nathan was downstairs showing off, Sarah was outside, waiting in a rental car down the street. I had one shot to make it out without him noticing. Heart pounding, I grabbed my pre-packed bag from the back of my closet. Clothes, cash, my burner phone, my journal of evidence, everything I needed to start over. I took one last look around the room. Then I slipped out the bedroom window onto the ledge. It was a 10-foot drop to the lawn below. I took a deep breath and jumped. Pain shot up my ankle as I landed, but I didn't stop running. Sarah's car was waiting, the door already open. I threw myself inside. "Drive!" I gasped. Sarah floored it, and just like that, I was gone. As the city lights faded behind us, my body started shaking. The weight of everything, the years of control, the gaslighting, the fear, it all came crashing down at once. I sobbed into my hands, my whole body trembling. Sarah reached over, squeezing my hand tight. "You're safe now, Mia," she whispered. "He'll never touch you again." And for the first time in years, I believed her. But I also knew one thing for certain. Nathan wasn't going to let me go without a fight. And this battle? It was far from over. Nathan realized I was gone faster than I expected. I had hoped to have at least a few hours before he noticed. But less than an hour after I left, Sarah's phone rang. Nathan's name flashed across the screen. My stomach dropped. "Do not answer," I whispered, my heart pounding. Sarah put the phone on silent, her grip tightening on the steering wheel. "That asshole is probably tearing the house apart right now." I nodded, swallowing hard. I could picture it perfectly. Nathan storming upstairs, finding our room empty, his grip tightening around his whiskey glass before smashing it against the wall. He would go from confusion to rage in seconds. And then, he would come looking for me. Sarah drove straight to a motel on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, just a run-down place with flickering neon lights, but it was off the radar. "You'll be safe here for the night," she said, passing me the motel key. "Tomorrow, we figure out the next step." I nodded, exhaustion pressing down on me. The moment I stepped inside, I locked the door and collapsed onto the bed. My body ached, my mind raced, but the second my head hit the pillow, I was out cold. I woke up to banging. Loud, angry. My heart slammed into my ribs. For a second, I thought he found me, but then, "Mia, it's me." Sarah's voice. I exhaled so hard my chest ached. Shaking, I unlocked the door. Sarah burst in, pale and breathless. "Nathan knows you're gone," she said. "And Mia, he's not taking it well." I swallowed. "What did he do?" Sarah pulled out her phone and turned the screen toward me. It was a screenshot of a Facebook post. Nathan had written, "My wife, Mia, has gone missing. If anyone sees her, please let me know. I'm worried sick. She's not in the right state of mind. She's been struggling emotionally, and I just want to make sure she's safe." Bile rose in my throat. This bastard was playing the victim. He wasn't looking for me to bring me back. He was making sure that if I ever told my story, no one would believe me. I should have expected it. This was classic Nathan. He wasn't just dangerous because of his temper. He was dangerous because he knew how to manipulate people. He was already rewriting the narrative. I had two choices. Keep running, stay hidden, cut off my past, disappear forever. Fight back. I wasn't sure which terrified me more, but then Sarah's phone dinged again. Another text. This time, from Nathan's mother, Margaret. "Sarah, I know Mia is with you. Do the right thing and bring her home before things get worse." My blood ran cold. I looked at Sarah, my hands trembling. "He's using his connections," I whispered. "He's turning people against me." Sarah shut off her phone and grabbed my shoulders. "Mia, listen to me. He's trying to control the story, but you have something he doesn't." I met her gaze, my heart hammering. Proof. And just like that, the fear in me shifted. Nathan had power. Nathan had money. Nathan had connections. But I had the truth, and I was going to use it. Nathan thought he was winning. He thought he could manipulate everyone into believing that I was just some unstable wife who ran away in a fragile emotional state. But he forgot one thing. I had proof, and I was about to use it to destroy him. Sarah and I sat in the dim motel room, her phone between us. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the evidence I had spent months collecting. Voice recordings, screenshots of threatening texts, timestamps of every moment of abuse. I had been preparing for this long before I even had the courage to leave. "We have enough to ruin him," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Sarah nodded. "Then let's do it." We started with the recordings, the most damning one, the night Nathan admitted to drugging me before the party. Sarah created a brand new social media account, completely anonymous, and posted it. A caption, simple and powerful. "This is the man you trust, the man you respect. Listen to what he does behind closed doors." And then we let it spread. The fallout was immediate. Nathan's carefully crafted concerned husband act began to crumble in real time. His friends, colleagues, even his firm's partners, they saw the recording. They heard him bragging about spiking my drink, and they believed it. Within hours, the comments poured in. "Wait, is this real? This is terrifying. This dude is a lawyer? How has he not been arrested? This makes me sick. Imagine what else he's done." Nathan's reputation was unraveling before his eyes. But we weren't done. Sarah and I took it a step further. I still had my burner phone, the one Nathan didn't know about. I used it to send copies of my evidence to local journalists, Nathan's law firm partners, advocacy groups for domestic abuse survivors. Within 24 hours, news outlets started picking up the story. By the next morning, headlines were everywhere. Prominent attorney exposed in disturbing abuse. Allegations leaked recording suggests high-powered lawyer drugged his wife. Nathan had spent years building his empire, and I burned it to the ground in a single night. Then, he called me. My burner phone buzzed, a blocked number. Sarah's eyes widened. "It's him." I stared at the screen, my pulse racing. Then, I answered. "Mia." Nathan's voice came through the speaker, calm, too calm. "You think you've won?" I stayed silent. "You have no idea what you've just done." His voice dropped lower, dangerous. "But you will." And then he hung up. Sarah's face was pale. "Mia, he sounds unhinged." I exhaled, gripping the phone so tight my knuckles went white. "He is." But I wasn't afraid anymore. For the first time, Nathan was the one losing control, and that terrified him. But he wasn't going to go down quietly. I knew that, and I had to be ready for what came next. Nathan wasn't the type to go down without a fight. He thrived on power and control, and for the first time in his life, he had neither. That made him dangerous. I knew his next move wouldn't be an apology. It wouldn't be damage control. It would be war, and I was right. The next morning, Sarah shook me awake, her face pale. "Mia, you need to see this." She held out her phone, and my stomach dropped when I saw the screen. Nathan had gone on the offensive. He had hired a crisis management team, the kind that cleaned up scandals for politicians and CEOs, and they were twisting the entire story. Disgruntled wife smears, respected attorney with baseless accusations. Mental health concerns surround woman's wild allegations. Attorney's team releases statement. "We have proof Mia is unstable." They were trying to discredit me, make me look like some delusional, vengeful ex-wife who made everything up. And worst of all, they had fabricated texts to back it up, screenshots of fake messages, making it look like I had sent erratic, threatening texts to Nathan in the days before I left. "That son of a bitch," Sarah seethed. "He's trying to gaslight the entire world." I gritted my teeth, my whole body shaking with fury. Let him try. Because Nathan had money and PR specialists. But I had the truth. And I wasn't done fighting. I needed more than just social media exposure. I needed legal backing. So I made a phone call. To Emily Carter, a lawyer who specialized in domestic abuse cases. She picked up on the second ring. "Mia, I saw the news. I was hoping you'd call." My breath hitched. "You believe me?" She scoffed. "Of course I do. We've seen his type before. They always play the same game. Control, destroy, discredit. But I have something he doesn't." "What?" I whispered. "A way to end him legally. If you're ready to fight, so am I." I was more than ready. Within 24 hours, Emily filed a restraining order against Nathan. Not only that, she contacted Nathan's law firm directly, sending them all the evidence, including the recording of him admitting to drugging me. Her message was clear. If your firm does not take action, we will take this to court, and we will win. The partners at Nathan's firm were ruthless businessmen. They didn't care about morality, but they did care about their reputation. And within 48 hours, Nathan was fired. Just like that. Nathan was losing everything. His job, his credibility, his control over me. but I wanted to make sure he never had power over anyone else again. So I took one last step. I met with a national news outlet and told them everything. Every dark, twisted, horrifying detail. They ran the story immediately. The Real Nathan Blackwood, a lawyer's secret life of abuse and manipulation. By the next morning, his name was everywhere. By that night, he was a public disgrace, and for the first time in his life, Nathan had no way to talk his way out of it. Then, he snapped. Sarah and I were packing up the motel when it happened. The door slammed open so hard it shook the walls, and standing there in the doorway was Nathan. His eyes were wild, his hair a mess, his face twisted with rage. "You think this is over?" he snarled. "You think you can ruin me and walk away?" My blood ran cold. He looked unhinged, more dangerous than I had ever seen him before. Sarah moved in front of me. "Get the hell out of here, Nathan." He ignored her. His eyes were locked on me. "You destroyed my life, Mia." His voice was a low, deadly whisper. "Now I'm going to destroy yours." He lunged. I was ready, because I knew, deep down, it would come to this. I had dialed 911 the second I saw him step into the room. And as he charged toward me, I heard it. The sound of sirens. The sound of cops storming into the motel. Nathan barely had time to react before he was slammed to the ground, handcuffed, and dragged away screaming. His reign of terror? Over. And me? I was finally free. Nathan was behind bars, but I knew better than to think this was over. Men like him, men who thrived on control, manipulation, and power, didn't just roll over and accept defeat. He was going to fight, and I was going to finish this. 2 weeks after Nathan's arrest, I sat in a packed courtroom, my heart hammering as I faced the man who had once controlled every aspect of my life. He looked different now. Gone was the polished lawyer with the expensive suit and smug confidence. He sat behind the defense table, shackled, his once pristine shirt wrinkled, his hair unkempt, but his eyes, still the same, still filled with rage, still convinced that he would win. His lawyer stood and made their first move. "Your Honor, my client is the true victim in this case. These accusations are nothing more than the desperate actions of a bitter, vengeful ex-wife." The courtroom murmured. The audacity, but I didn't flinch, because I was ready for this. Emily, my lawyer, stood up. "Your Honor, we have extensive evidence proving a long history of emotional, psychological, and physical abuse. We have recordings, text messages, witness testimonies, and most damning of all." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "A recording of the defendant admitting to drugging my client." Gasps rippled through the room. The judge's face hardened. Nathan shifted uncomfortably, his lawyer turning pale. Because this wasn't just a messy divorce case anymore. This was a criminal case, and Nathan Blackwood was going down. Nathan tried one last desperate move. His lawyer brought Margaret, his mother, to the stand. She wept, voice shaking, playing the part of the grieving, heartbroken mother. "My son would never do such things," she sobbed. "Mia is unstable. She's always been unstable." The jury watched her with cold, disbelieving eyes, because Emily had already anticipated this move, and she had prepared. "Mrs. Blackwood," Emily said, flipping through her files, "you claim Mia was unstable, yes?" "Yes," Margaret sniffled. "She's always been emotionally fragile," Emily smiled, the kind of smile a lawyer gives when they're about to tear their opponent apart. "Then can you explain why, over the past 3 years, you sent multiple text messages to Nathan, warning him to be gentler with Mia, reminding him to control his temper, telling him he needed to stop going too far?" Margaret's face drained of color. A murmur swept through the courtroom as Emily flashed the messages on the screen for the jury to see. Nathan's own mother had been covering for him. The final nail in his coffin. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. When they returned, I barely breathed as the judge read the verdict. On the charge of domestic abuse, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. On the charge of unlawful administration of a controlled substance, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. On the charge of harassment and unlawful intimidation, guilty. Nathan's jaw clenched, his fists tight. He couldn't believe it. He had spent his entire life manipulating people, controlling the system, twisting the truth to suit his own reality. And now, the truth had destroyed him. The judge's gavel slammed. "Nathan Blackwood, you are sentenced to 20 years in prison with no possibility of parole for 10. And just like that, he was gone. I exhaled for the first time in years. The media went wild. Every news outlet ran the story. High-powered attorney exposed as domestic abuser, sentenced to 20 years justice for Mia Blackwood, the woman who took down a monster. My name was everywhere. At first, it was overwhelming. I had spent so long hiding, shrinking, making myself small just to survive. Now, I was a symbol. People reached out, women who had been through what I had, people who were still trapped, who needed to know they weren't alone. And I realized I could do something with this. So I did. 1 year later, I was standing in a crowded conference hall speaking into a microphone. For years, I believed there was no way out, that he was too powerful, too connected, that no one would believe me. I scanned the room, hundreds of women, survivors, advocates, people who had lived through their own nightmares. But he wasn't invincible. Abusers never are. The system wants us to believe they are, but the truth is, when we stand together, when we refuse to stay silent. I paused, letting the words settle. We win. The room erupted into thunderous applause, because I had done more than escape Nathan. I had taken my life back. And now, I was helping others do the same. That night, back at my new home, a quiet little place in a different city, far from my past, I curled up on my couch, finally at peace. And then, there was a knock at the door. I hesitated, my heart skipping a beat. I hadn't expected anyone. Slowly, cautiously, I opened the door, and standing there was Sarah. She grinned, holding up a bottle of wine and a pizza box. "You didn't think I'd let you celebrate alone, did you?" I laughed, a real, full, unburdened laugh. For the first time in years, I was free. And this was only the beginning.